Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us today as we present Revolutionizing Real Estate, the Smart Solutions of Artificial Intelligence. I'm Dr. Marsha Gordon. I'm President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. We have been focusing on artificial intelligence all year. This is the third of a year-long series entitled AI 360 Alliance. So it's very exciting. By the way, our next one is in person, and we're going to be focusing on AI in education. So please join us on April 23rd for that one. And artificial intelligence, as we know, is reshaping the commercial real estate landscape, providing innovative solutions and extraordinary opportunities. We are so proud to partner once again. I think this is probably, Anthony, our seventh time partnering with Fordham School of Professional and Continuing Studies and its Real Estate Institute, its extraordinary Real Estate Institute, to explore strategies and assess challenges to maximize AI's potentials. Fordham School of Professional and Continuing Studies offers a number of bachelor's degrees, including post-baccalaureate and master's degrees, including in many areas of real estate, and a master's degree in health informatics. PCS also has developed a Good Neighbor initiative, which offers an automatic 30% discount on tuition for Westchester residents in their undergraduate programs at the Westchester campus. Thank you, Dr. Anthony Davidson, Dean of Fordham School of Professional and Continuing Studies, and the entire Fordham team. You are absolutely terrific. We're so proud to be your partner, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Anthony, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Marsha. It is indeed, I think, 7 years. At Fordham, we like to associate only with the best, and I can think of nobody better to associate with than the Business Council of Westchester and yourself, Dr. Marsha Gordon, a good friend, somebody who gets things done. Look at the history of the BCW, look at what happens. And I've really been playing in the Westchester space now for almost 15 years. And I do know that anybody or any corporation, individual, jointly, severally, you want to get things done, BCW is the place to go. And I thank you for letting us partner with you to bring these, I think, what have been very, very successful events to the general public and important areas of conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony. We also, I wasn't sure if there was more coming, so I just hesitated there. But thank you so very much. And we also want to thank our sponsors: Wells Fargo, the Catalyst, Westchester County's Office of Economic Development, RM Friedland, LeChase, Dorff, Nelson, and Zatterer, LLP, and the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors. These have been companies and organizations that have been with us in this series and everything else in our community for years, and we thank you very, very much for your great support. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Joshua Harris. Dr. Harris is the Executive Director of Fordham's Real Estate Institute. He's also the Managing Partner of Magnolia Hill Partners, a family office focused on real estate and private equity investments. Josh specializes in real estate development, finance, capital markets, and business organizational leadership and strategy, and chairs the Counselors of Real Estate's Economic Advisory Council. Josh, it's all yours. I'm just going to say, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat room. And I can't wait to hear this discussion. Enjoy.
Thank you, Marsha. Thank you, Dean Davidson and the Business Council of Westchester. It's a great honor to get to lead this panel. We have an amazing set of panelists. We're going to lead off today with some welcome remarks from Nikki Greenberg. She is the founder and chief innovation officer of Real Estate of the Future, a real estate technology innovation strategist. Nikki has recognized with the top five most influential women in real estate and a top 25 CRE innovator. So Nikki, would you please kick off our discussion and frame what we are getting to talk about today?
Great, thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in today. Despite all of those lovely things, just had to say, it's still a clumsy transition moving over into a presentation. So I'm just going to set the scene a little bit in talking about AI and just giving a bit of a framework for us to understand where it is and how it's going to start impact, or how it already is impacting our industry. So the world really became very enthralled with AI in November of 2022 when ChatGPT was released. And the reason for this, number one, is because of how we can communicate using AI. And of course, we've seen that we can write it emails, it can listen into songs, it can analyze images. And for us to be able to interact with technology using what's called natural language processing, or NLP, is just a great help for us humans to be able to control technology in a new way. So that was one area where it really started to enthrall us and be a bit of a game changer. The other area where AI has really started to enthrall us is in its ability to generate new things. So you can throw in a whole lot of data. It doesn't just spit out any answer, but it can create things. So we've seen different AIs doing things like creating beautiful images or movies or songs. So that's generative AI, and it's something we're going to be talking a fair bit about today. So just to level set somewhat. The thing we need to remember when we're talking about AI is that it's math, not magic. And sometimes it feels like it's magic because you ask a question and suddenly you get an answer. But really what's happening behind the scenes is that there's an algorithm that's happening, i.e. a set of instructions. So we know with any kind of mathematical algorithm, it really relies on the information that it's given to be able to make an analysis. So if you're giving it the wrong information, it's going to give a wrong outcome. And AI is not going to magically just fix your data or magically come up with the right answer if it doesn't have the right information. So you're going to hear today a lot about data, or data, if you want me to translate. But we really need to be thinking about the quality of the data that we give to AI to be able to enable it to give us a quality outcome. So this chart describes where we are in terms of technological advancement. And you can see what we're at is what's called the sixth wave of innovation, which started in 2020. And this wave of innovation is all about advanced technologies like AI, IoT, which is, robots and drones, clean technologies. And it's akin to where we were in the 1990s at the start of the digital age. So a lot of people are asking, is AI revolutionary? Is it going to change everything? I believe that it is. I think it's the equivalent of where we were in the 1990s when we got Excel, email, Minesweeper, the start of the internet, mobile phones, etc. So we actually are at a turning point in terms of where tech is and the impact that it's going to have. This one's a little bit scary, but I think it's important to understand just the speed of advancement for AI undertaking certain tasks. And what it shows is that in terms of certain tasks like handwriting recognition, speech recognition, image recognition, reading comprehension, it's been able to get a lot smarter very quickly to that level, that black line at the top being human performance. So, these technologists have been working very hard to train the AI to get very good at understanding us, to be able to do things. And one of the things that I do mention with this chart is we also have to remember that while the technology is getting better, us human beings should not be flatlining. We also have to evolve along with it. And that's why countries like Singapore are giving, training grants to people over 40 to reskill out of a recognition that, yes, we can't just flatline and expect that things are going to be okay. But don't worry, AI is not going to replace us, and we'll get into that today. However, there is a general metric that's used to say that there's about a third of our working day. There's about a third of tasks that we can and should give over to automations like, and technologies like AI. So if you think about your working day, if you're doing anything that's repetitive, dull, or dangerous, that's the metric that's used in the robotics industry. Those are the type of tasks you should actually think about outsourcing to AI. Now, from my experience, I'll give you an example where I've definitely experienced a digital transformation, a digital disruption, and a change, which might be, something that you might feel too. So my professional background is I started in real estate development as an architect, And when I was at university, for the first 3 years of my course, I had to do drafting by hand. For the last 2 courses, I could use 2D AutoCAD. And by the time I graduated, it was all about 3D CAD, Revit, BIM models. So for me as a professional, I had to learn how to use the tools to stay relevant in my role. I could still do my job as an architect if I couldn't use the tools, but I'm a lot more effective if I can use the tools at hand. And of course, you fast forward today, and with generative AI, we have something that's, I'll flip back to that one. We have something that is quite spectacular in the way that this technology, even just by moving shapes around, it can start generating new buildings. I mean, I'll let you decide whether this can be engineered, whether it can stand up, but essentially we are talking about a very powerful technology that can do a lot of tasks for us and actually expand our creativity and imagination. This one's kind of cool. I'll just throw this one in. It's actually a product called Daisy, which is an AI that looks at the engineering for timber floor plates. It can calculate it straight away with some immediacy, and it can also look at the materials. And they're looking at bringing that also into being able to do a fully engineered building. So just to give you an idea of the speed at which things can be done within the industry. So that's my introduction. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always sharing interesting posts. You can scan that QR code. I think we've all become very familiar with QR codes and what they can do. And I will hand over to the others so we can lead the discussion. So that's my intro.
Great, Nikki, thank you so much. Very interesting. And obviously, one thing I always love about this topic is if nothing else, you get incredibly interesting visuals that actually illustrate this. So it's always a good way to start. So at this point, we're going to switch into our panel mode. So I'm going to introduce, and Nikki will be remaining on as a panelist and be available for Q&A. And I should point out the webinar chat is where to put your questions. We certainly budget some time at the end, but we also might decide to answer your questions as you ask them, if it's either moderators or a panelist prerogative. So if you have the question, please put it in that chat. All right, bringing the rest of our panelists on, we have Ravi Bhatia, who is an adjunct professor for us at the Fordham Real Estate Institute, and also a business development manager with Skanska USA Civil. We have Sanjay Gandhi, a senior managing director and for property management of Besson Partners, and Serge Rita, the co-founder of Alpha, I hope I pronounced this right, Alpha Rhythm AI, a tech company focused on the real estate industry. He is also an adjunct professor for us here at the Fordham Real Estate Institute and currently the chair of our technology curriculum committee here at Fordham. So with our new panelists, I'm going to start with Ravi, then go to Sanjay, then Serge. And I'd just like you please first just, if there is any expanded introduction you'd like to give, but just answer this simple question. From your personal perspective, what is the single most consequential impact of, say, real estate on the business and the real estate world that you are expecting or maybe afraid of, or just, like this is the one that is going to happen first? So we'll start with Ravi and then move on.
Thank you, Josh. So initially, when I learned about AI a few years ago, and like everyone, you start with this curve. You're afraid. What is this? Something new? Should I be afraid of it? Will I have to learn something that is, maybe beyond understanding? And then I found out that everyone is going through the same challenges. And then specifically looking at opportunities in real estate and construction, I looked at AI, as Nikki pointed out, as a tool. And I see great opportunities to improve efficiencies and reduce risk. And for us in the construction industry especially, that's huge. If we can reduce transaction costs, if we can improve safety, and if we can improve efficiencies in the supply chain, now we're really making game-changing moves, which are all very positive for our industry. So I view it as a net positive, and we have a lot to learn, but the journey is going to be very interesting. And I'm going to turn it over to Sanjay Gandhi.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Josh. So AI in the commercial real estate field, it's basically come through automation. A lot of our tasks are repetitive, a lot of our tasks, and suddenly you find there are tools that you can use to make your life a lot easier, for lack of a better example. And then you sit back scratching your head and say, how is that possible? And then a couple of years later, you find out, oh, that was the beginning stages of AI in the real estate industry. I think the advantages that we see are going to be in automating a lot of the mundane tasks that we do. Like Ravi said, it might reduce transaction costs. A lot of the research tools that we use could be automated. But real estate industry has been traditionally a handshake industry, and that's going to be some of the challenges. But definitely in automating tasks, it's made everyone's life a lot easier. I think we can better serve the ultimate goal using AI. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, great comments, and thanks everybody for having me here today, and thanks for being here on this panel. I'm going to pick up on what Ravi and Sanjay and Nikki said in some of their comments. From my perspective, I'm a little bit more in the weeds of AI because for the last 6 years I've been actually developing software integrating AI, or at least integrating AI for the last couple of years. But from my perspective, there are really two main sides of the real estate industry. There's the sort of investment and creation side of it, and the operations side of it. And one of the things that I've been much more involved in is the investment side of it and the development side of it. And I think the way that artificial intelligence, at least where, in the direction that it's heading, could have a huge impact is in the way that we identify and perceive the opportunities and risks in a real estate investment. Investing in real estate, as we all know, is very, very different than, buying an iPhone or, buying some groceries. It's an enormous investment that is not and should not be taken lightly. And that requires a lot of information and a lot of analysis. And I think that artificial intelligence could be extremely impactful in the incorporation of an enormous amount of data that humans are just not capable of analyzing on their own. And so using a machine coupled with some sort of artificial intelligence could reduce risk and improve the investment opportunity in the real estate industry. And for those that can leverage that kind of capability, they may be able to have that kind of advantage in the market that others may not be able to.
Come back. All right, thank you so much, Serge. So I'm going to direct the next question to start off with Nikki, but then I'm going to probably ask everybody else to just chime in whoever's most interested. So I think let's just go ahead and bring out what I think the largest concern that people have had in this last, call it 12 months, is, can AI do my job? Is AI going to take away jobs? Is it going to create jobs? And I think it's interesting. I will just give a quick personal anecdote. I tried to use ChatGPT. I will admit it was the free one, and some people told me if I had paid, maybe that would have made a difference. But I can only know that to when I was trying to write some new syllabi and work on some sort of course part. So what I do for Fordham, and I'll be honest, I quickly discovered that I thought at first glance when I read them, wow, these might be 50% of the way there. And there's certainly some good ideas. Then as I really went through it, I realized maybe more like 10% when I actually got to sort of my product. And every time it would always suggest a textbook. And the textbook, 99% of the time, was completely fake and made up. It took a real name and it kind of, created a textbook title that sounded like it would go with the course, kind of like a computer trying to solve an algorithm. And I'm an economist, PhD by trade type. I understand what how those algorithms work. So I walked away saying, you know what? I think my job is pretty secure. At least it comes to writing syllabi, at least for today, right? But who knows in the future? So Nikki, that whole the question on jobs, the question on the impact. What's your view on it? And to the extent that maybe you think that if you could localize it into kind of the Westchester business community, if you have a thought on that, I'd love to add on, and then I'd like to open that up for the panel.
Yeah, thanks. Throwing me straight into the lion's den here. Jobs are going to evolve, and that's why I gave that illustration about myself as an architect having to learn how to use new tools. So yeah, we're going to learn how to use new tools, and for a lot of things, it will be an upgrade where you're using your typical tools and suddenly there's a new feature, some people will lean in, others won't lean in. If you lean in, there's a great opportunity, as some of the other panelists described. But I think one of the things that I like to, well, there's probably two things that I'd like to kind of throw into the discussion. And this is one of the things that has been referenced. The first thing is that with real estate, it is a relationship-based business. And really what we're going to see, I believe, with AI coming in is we're going to see a combination. We're going to see, you know, the human, the AI, and what I call the superhuman. And essentially, AI can do certain things. It's great at crunching a lot of numbers. It's great at analysis. It's great at doing that very quickly. What humans are great at, relationship, trust, ambiguity, etc. So combine them together and you're supercharged. So there's great opportunity there. The other thing that we need to be conscious of, and you know, this is where I think there is a great opportunity. And I was just listening to this podcast this morning. If anyone likes podcasts, here's a recommendation. The Hidden Brain, there's an episode with Daniel Kahneman, and he's actually talking about noise. And what was quite interesting, and this isn't a real estate example, but I thought it was quite interesting, is that he was actually looking at analysis in the medical system. And what they were finding is that noise is basically us being human and the errors of judgment that we make. And what they found is that you could have the same specialist look at an X-ray. In the morning, they might give one conclusion. In the afternoon, they might give another conclusion. Or you might have judges looking at a legal case, you know, which are identical and giving different conclusions, because us humans, we have errors in judgment. So AI is really good at analysis, that it can actually give a confident analysis on the same data set that's going to be more consistent, which is something that's very helpful. But the other thing that I'll throw in, you know, my third point, somebody's asked me about hallucinations, and I think this is something that's important for us to understand, and it's been alluded to. The way that I like to describe where generative AI is at the moment, and the way that we should be thinking about using it in our industry, is I like to use the analogy of it's kind of like an intern. So it's pretty smart, but it's still learning, and we need to supervise it. We need to train it. We need to check its work. And somebody yesterday introduced me to the word sophomoric. I think that's quite appropriate. It's overconfident. It sounds like it knows what it's doing, but it's making up some stuff along the way. So if you're using something like ChatGPT, you do need to supervise it, but you're also, in the same way as you might train an intern, when it gets things wrong, you need to steer it in the right direction so that it can be more accurate over time.
Great comments, Nikki. You've triggered some things for all of us to think about. Yes, jobs. So it's a very like baseline question. Will my job be threatened? But taking what you've said, it's more nuanced than that. It's how does it make our job better? A couple of things that come to mind. One is that we're transitioning now from sort of a specialist mindset. Because if you are great at analysis on one particular area, then maybe AI can do that repetitive task. But if you think of your job as multidisciplinary, there is a mundane portion of your job, repetitive tasks, which is, as you said, a third or more. And then there's the human judgment side of it and the creativity side of it. And that's where AI can help us become the superhuman that you talk about. About 40 years ago, there was a book that was published called Megatrend. I think it was Megatrends, and written by John Naisbitt. And he said that the more technology that we have, the more, and he sort of forecasted this, that we are going to be so enthralled with technology, but we must not lose sight of the fact that that will actually make the human side of what we do even more important. So perhaps this new transition that we have, this fifth wave, is going to underscore the importance of connectivity relationships. So I advise our students also that you may be great at your particular area of interest, whether it's architecture, engineering, construction management, or real estate development, but don't lose sight of the fact that you're going to have to deal with people, and you have to understand negotiation and understand leadership and the things that come from experience, and not just something that you can look up on ChatGPT.
Interesting. Serge or Sanjay? Sanjay?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to take from what Nikki said that, and I think that the explanation was perfect in that AI is actually an intern that's there to make your life a lot easier. Your interactions can be, it can do the back office work that you need to better communicate with your clients, with your partners, with your tenants in case of commercial real estate. But it's not going to replace the human interaction. You still need to be on top of the game. You're just going to be more evolved in doing your day-to-day tasks. So I think that description really hit home, at least with me.
Yeah, I mean, everything that everybody said so far is clearly, definitely obvious, in not obvious in the sense that, they weren't relevant. It's just that it's clear that people have the opportunity to either adopt some new technology or not. I mean, I also started out in the real estate industry as an architect, and just like Nikki, I was at a time when not really so much the industry itself, but the educational system of architecture was transitioning from hand and paper to keyboard and screen. And I mean, Nikki's description of her experience in architecture school is almost identical to mine. And what I recognized at the time as, somebody just entering this field is that out there in the industry, there were people that were holding on to the idea that this new technology, is ridiculous, right? What's most important is the architect's ability as a human to control what they're doing on a piece of paper that they can touch and feel. And we all know what happened to that, right? So the reality of any new technology, just think about any new technology. Other people have heard me say this, probably people on this panel here have heard me say that when the brilliance of Apple and Steve Jobs was with the iPhone was really that he introduced a piece of technology to people that they didn't even know that they even wanted or needed at the time. And that's, I think, a good analogy for artificial intelligence. But, there are going to be people that are going to adopt it. There are certainly going to be people that are going to, embrace it. And like Robbie said, at first people might have been afraid. They might have been thinking like, well, this is, that's not going to replace me, right? But I really think it comes down to the individual and how they want to navigate their own career. It's a choice to learn or not learn any new technology. I happen to be one of those people that embrace it, but not everybody is, and that's not right or wrong. It's just a question of, look, artificial intelligence is here to stay in whatever form it is. Eventually, the interface that we have right now with just kind of going on the free version of ChatGPT and querying some stuff is going to plateau and go away. But there will be other implementations of artificial intelligence that are not going away, right? They're getting more and more entrenched and ingrained. And just like every other technology or every other product out there or every other idea, the ones that embrace it and push it forward will enjoy a competitive advantage in the market, and those that choose not to will experience that as a cost of doing business later on. And artificial intelligence is no different than any other innovation. But like Nikki said, it seems like a little magic. It feels really cool. But the reality is that it's artificial. That's why it's called artificial intelligence. It's not human and it doesn't think. It just calculates. And so just starting from that basis alone might make it more comfortable for people to recognize that you're really just talking to a machine just in just a different interface than you had been before.
Very good point. I think, it reminds us of the discussions, obviously, and Serge is working on us with us at Fordham, how we're, as we look at curriculum, as we look at things, if I'm guiding students, I don't have a firm answer, but I always tell you might as well embrace it, try to learn some things to show how to eat. Maybe it's a waste of your time, maybe it's extremely valuable, but I'd rather sound and have some experience. I know what I'm doing in it than be at the risk is kind of just good career advice. And I've seen some interesting things that we have some great technological specialists on the education side inside of Fordham that are working on this and generating coursework and looking how they can enhance classes using AI. And again, it gets Is it going to be as good? Does it actually work as advertised? I think we'll see. But I do want to taking this a little bit with the jobs thing a little bit and kind of localize this obviously for since we're talking kind of to a largely presumably Westchester based audience. There's always been, and this I should alert, this has kind of been always been my area of study focus, kind of as a real estate economist, looking at markets and where people move, where business grows, and how cities change, et cetera. There's always been this tension, or certainly in the last 20, 30 years, about suburbs versus the urban mega cities, the superstar cities. And obviously, Westchester is probably one of the most classically defined rail connected, a la bedroom communities that's ever kind of existed, certainly in the United States. You see more of them actually in bigger global cities where transport and real estate costs are higher, transport costs lower. So we had this pandemic and we were all kind of forced to stay home. And suddenly people were moving certainly up to Westchester, moving further up the Hudson Valley. They're moving out to Pennsylvania. They were moving down to Florida. They're moving to like shores of beaches in Idaho. And then it kind of came back, right? And we can all, not to enter the huge return to office debate that I know people do have, but AI kind of came in. There was this curveball, and there's this person by the name of Dror Polig, and I'll put it in the chat to spell for anyone who wants to find his blog. Some people find him controversial in the real estate world. At least he's interesting. I think whether you agree or not, pay attention. But he made this point when AI was kind of becoming the watchword of the day over 12 months ago now, right? That when you took the whole remote work concept, and look, we're doing this on Zoom, so it's kind of like you can't not acknowledge that it somewhat functions because we're literally doing it. We're not sitting in a hotel ballroom in White Plains or something like that. So literally, he thought that AI, when you sort of combined with sort of all the other remote tech, was going to kind of supercharge it, right? And he wasn't. I don't think this was necessarily mean that the office doesn't work out or things like that. But so my question or my thought is, does this mean for communities like Westchester, if you're a business owner, right? Does it give a business who's sitting in Westchester, perhaps you're an accounting firm, right? Something that, right, obviously there's local need, but there's also a national need. Does this create a new area where that Westchester-based or housed business can now compete better on a national, global scale? Can they get talent? Can they bring in? So that's kind of what I know. And I guess, Serge, I want to start with you, and then maybe we'll reverse through the direction.
Yeah, thanks. That's an interesting question, Josh. But again, as somebody that's more in the weeds of actually making technology rather than using it, even though I've used it just like everybody else, one of the key things about, and Nikki said this in her introduction as well, is that, there's no way that artificial intelligence or any technology that, at least any soft technology can work without data behind it, right? We need data. And, like a chat GPT, a generative pre-trained transformer, right? That's what GPT stands for, is that's exactly what it is. It's trained on an enormous data set. It started out on sort of this contained data set, and then it was unleashed on the internet, or I should say the internet was unleashed on it. And it starts to be trained on this enormous data set. And you mentioned the difference between a sort of low density area like Westchester County, where I grew up, and a high density city like New York City, where I've lived for my entire adult life. And there are significant differences. And from my perspective, the significant difference is really in the data. And the data of real estate is a really unique type of data. It's highly geographically based, right? Unlike, say, an internet business that isn't necessarily geography based. It's, we're talking about how many people visited a website, where are they from? United States, China, Germany. It's not the same kind of thing as real estate that's very hyper local. And so I think the question really is, what type of business are we talking about? Are we talking about a business that is, say, a brick and mortar retail business that the only way it's going to compete is by having some sort of omni-channel presence, right? On the ground, in physical presence, and also in virtual on the internet. That's one thing. But then, you have something like an accountant, where these days, I think I haven't actually gone into an accountant's office in like 10 years. And that's all because it can be done on the internet or via some software like TurboTax or something like that. And so I think a lot of it has to do with, number one, what the type of business is, and number two, what the location is, right? In New York City, you know, it's a 15-minute city, right? In 15 minutes, you can get almost anything. If you walk 15 minutes, you could get anything you want, and you can do whatever, anything you need to do in most places in New York City, especially Manhattan. But in a place like Westchester, and depending on where you are in Westchester, that might not be possible. So I think it's the answer to that is a little bit more about, well, what are we really talking about here? And I think that's what the nature of real estate is, right? It's kind of like, are you investing in an apartment building or are you investing in a warehouse? They're both real estate, but they're just so different that I think it needs a little bit more drill down onto what it is. But having said that, taking it, and I'll stop here, taking it back to artificial intelligence, you know, instead of just the internet and technology in general, I mean, I think right now, the way it works, you know, for artificial intelligence, to take it to the extreme of doing someone's taxes is kind of a really scary thing, right? I mean, the government asks us to tell them what the taxes are that we think we should pay. And that's a really unique system here. And that's kind of putting a human element into it. And the reason why GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, has the G in front of it generally is because it's, you know, we kind of make it ourselves. So for artificial intelligence to kind of go and say, look, we can do your taxes for you and have some sort of reach, is an interesting question. I think it's more getting a little bit more nuanced on where it is and what we're talking about doing.
Yeah, great points, Sergio. I think that what we're looking at in terms of the opportunities that are available to us, we have to look at it. What's right? We're in a bricks and mortar industry. We're in real estate and construction, right? From a construction point of view, you know, I see so many small and mid-sized GCs and subcontractors, and they're trying to understand AI. The best advice I've gotten from some of the AI experts that we speak with is that companies need to formulate a strategy. You just can't dive into AI thinking that you're going to have a solution. What is your strategy, and how can you use AI to further your business? If you're a construction company, what kind of data that you have available? How much of that data is proprietary? How much of it is generally available? If you don't have an AI strategy, which I think that all companies are going to need to have some sort of AI strategy. The accounting example is an excellent example because, you know, you have software now that can pretty much populate all of the federal and state forms, you know, but you still need that human judgment. But in a bricks and mortar world, we need to have a strategy before we dive into AI. Because the tendency is, oh, this is like a new toy. Let's get into it. And if you don't have the data available, you can get in. You could go down the wrong pathway, and then you'd really be at a competitive disadvantage.
Also, you know, taking from what Sergio and Robbie said, and you know, I go back to the point that Nikki made, which is AI is a very intelligent intern. Small companies are going to have to learn how to use an intern to make the task better. What can they outsource to this intern? What can they rely on for you know, the tasks that the intern can take care of? Whereas the bigger companies are going to be it's going to be a lot easier for the bigger companies because they have a system in place. And I think that's where the challenge is going to be for the small businesses, is how do you use technology? How do you use this tool to make your life and your business better? I think somebody just asked a question about how in the short term will it help with purchasing real estate? And I think one of the ways it could is it gives you a better tool to do research on where market trend is, or what a certain geographic area, what's thriving. You know, is this a restaurant block? Is there a lot of traffic? What is the traffic pattern, so that I want to open up a retail store there? So I think the tools are going to be there. It's going to be up to the human that's using it to see how they can better make decisions.
Yeah, so wonderful insights from everyone, and I'll double down and agree with everyone. I'll also agree, Draw Pollock's wonderful. He's a close friend. His book is Rethinking Real Estate, and he puts out a newsletter, I think, on a weekly or sometimes daily basis, but wonderful thought leader. So if he says it, definitely look into it. I might just throw a few points in, referencing back to, Sergio talking about tax. In Estonia, they have a digital government, which is incredibly efficient. And I just quickly Googled it. You can file a tax return in less than 5 minutes. So in terms of, lightening the burden of doing business, and in terms of efficiency, to me, this is wonderful. But I think when we're talking about this thought of about, bricks and mortar, the fixed costs, the digital costs, the heavy costs, the digital, there's definitely a line in the sand that we need to draw. And the analogy that I like to use is just thinking almost about, and I think Sergio will appreciate this also from an architecture background. I love that, we're both architects, but I've come into very different spheres, showing the breadth of the profession and our ability to keep adapting. But the analogy that I like to use is kind of also thinking about, with the change that we had in the 20th century in architecture with, great leaders, great thought leaders and architects such as, Le Corbusier or Mies van der Rohe, moving to actually making structures lighter. So rather than having these burdensome, heavy masonry buildings, all of a sudden we just put it down to its most fundamental elements, having a slab and beam. And I think this is the way that businesses should be thinking about the way that they operate into the future as well. What is fixed and what is flexible? Because a lot of what is flexible are digital products. So if we come back, and I'm going to come back to using this analogy of, of accounting and managing your finances, that, yeah, you might have a head of finance, you might have a CFO, but what you might find is that in the background, you might outsource a lot of what you're doing, and a lot of that outsourcing actually might be, instead of a person, it might actually be an AI that's doing a lot of that work. So thinking about how you can lighten up your operations by embracing some of the technology that's available, but you're not going to get rid of the stuff that helps you stand up.
That's
Very good.
If I could just pick up on something that everyone said so far, especially what Nikki was just saying. One of the things that I talk about in really all of my classes is the idea of this pace of change dilemma. Real estate is a fixed asset, right? Let's face it. I mean, it's once it's built, it's fixed in time, and it's very, very hard to change. And when I say hard, what I mean is not only is it physically hard to change it, but it's hard to change from a capital investment standpoint, right? Costs a lot of money to change something. And we've got technology changing that are changing the way people do things, right? And think of it as like the real estate is like this fixed thing, that humans are this very, very flexible thing that move in and through this fixed armature. And the more and more that we change and adapt, the faster and faster that real estate becomes obsolete. And I think that's one way that artificial intelligence may have a tremendous impact on the built world, is that, we're changing so much rapidly than we have in the past before. And artificial intelligence is so much more closely related to how we do things, right? It's one thing to sort of type out something. It's another thing to kind of write a prompt and say, now type me something that says this, and it's done, right? That's like asking somebody to do it versus doing it yourself. So it's a much more human style interaction that we're obviously a lot more comfortable with. But and somebody asked the question here, which I thought was really interesting. In the short term, do you anticipate artificial intelligence tools will provide greater power to real estate buyers or sellers? That's a really interesting question, because there's really only 2 or 3 main sort of like elements of the real estate industry that's been around since the beginning of time. And that is, 1, access to capital, and 2, access to information, right? And the whether you're a buyer or a seller, but sometimes buyers, depending on who you are, or even a seller, they may have access to more information than someone else. And to the extent that I have more information than the other person across the table that I'm transacting with, I'm probably going to gain a competitive advantage and achieve what I want, which if I'm a buyer, right, which is a much lower price, right? Or if I'm a seller, a much higher price than that I might otherwise get if somebody had the same amount of information that I did. And the question is, can it, right? What are we really talking about here? Are we talking about artificial intelligence, or are we talking about data that we then do something with? And I can talk about data all day, right? But there's no artificial intelligence without data. And in real estate, while we've got data everywhere, it's locked up into little ponds instead of one giant ocean. And that's a distinct limitation that possibly one day will be unlocked, or possibly those ponds will turn into more little puddles that
It's also an opportunity. It's a great opportunity. So using information. So one of the great potentials of value to unlock in the construction industry is our supply chain, buying equipment. We've all gone through the supply chain shocks of a post-COVID world, and we're all very susceptible to it. Try buying heavy mechanical or electrical equipment today, and some of the lead times are a year, 2 years plus. And the opportunity is that as information becomes more readily available, and there are companies out there that are working on aggregation and disseminating this information, I think that there's going to be a lot more transparency in pricing, in terms and conditions, in streamlining contracts, where contractors, owners, general contractors, subcontractors, everybody is going to have access to direct pricing information, availability information from manufacturing firms. I think there's going to be a major disintermediation of suppliers who until now have enjoyed some pretty reasonable returns for serving as middlemen. And when you think of why is there a middleman, right? And I think of it, the brokerage side of it, buyer, seller. The middleman is there acting as an intermediary. Well, in the construction industry, if AI can help us gather a lot of information as contractors, maybe we go directly to manufacturers. Maybe specialty contractors can go directly to manufacturers instead of going to a supplier. And the analogy of that in real estate would be that maybe buyers and sellers all have access to similar information, and that arbitrage spread starts narrowing significantly over the next short term, I think next 2 to 3 years.
So I'm going to stand up for the brokerage community here. Well, there is a lot of data available, right? But it's how you convert that data into actual information. And that's where the middleman could come in. But more importantly, I think the challenges that the real estate industry is facing, and hopefully AI can help with, for one, is insurance. Cost of insurance has doubled in the last year. When commercial real estate deals for a multifamily building were being written earlier, it was $800 a door for insurance. That has gone up to $2,000 now, right? If you're underwriting a building in New York City, your insurance cost has almost tripled from a little before COVID. But your rent and your other expenses, it's just leads for a different conversation. But hopefully, this information can help in getting, helping the insurance industry to write a better product, to write something that's more cost effective, for the end user.
Yeah, and I'm just going to
Go ahead.
I'm just going to reference again this wonderful. I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat. This podcast I was listening to this morning with Daniel Kahneman and the Hidden Brain. And what they actually did is one of those areas where they were talking about noise and the difference between humans making a decision and a machine making a decision. They found that with insurance between different companies, when they were quoting on a policy, you might expect that the difference between companies looking at the same data might be in the order of a 10% margin of error, but they actually found that there was a 50% difference. So if you can have more standardization, more surety around your insurance policies, using that as an example and a cost of doing business, to your point, Sanjay, I think it can only be positive. So sorry to interject, but I have to.
Very good point. And I think definitely this applies to the insurance or other kinds, but I would be remiss if we didn't finish out this talk without a talk about some of the scary negative downsides, not on the employment do you have your job, but let's call it to privacy, to protection, and now what sort of the data overreach. And one of the examples, and this is something that um, to a real estate to a business contract, because it reminds I'm going to protect the names to dare say protect the innocents in this story, but um, a lot of buildings, modern office buildings and warehouses and retail centers have all kinds of what are, might be considered occupancy sensors to know how many people are there. This helps for for sustainability and HVAC efficiency and all other things, energy efficiency, right? Um, there's also key cards, right, specifically in office buildings or other other places that are more controlled. So these systems can track key cards in and out. We can track occupancy. We know if you're sitting at your office, or if every, we may not know individually, although God knows what trackers are on our phones, but all this data. And I used to believe that, well, I wasn't ever too worried about all the mass data collection because, it would, who would ever have the time to kind of mine this through, right? And now, in theory, you could have all kinds of, AI-driven algorithms that could find out, well, what companies are suddenly not showing up or suddenly are staying late till 2 a.m. And suddenly, your business privacy, not to mention your home privacy, is more at risk because suddenly a computer can actually do all that work to figure out trends. I mean, someone mentioned the IRS, right? I mean, the IRS has always used ratio and other kind of computer analytics to figure out who maybe didn't file all their income or is more likely to be committing fraud or something. But now, hypothetically, AI models might pick up on all kinds of trends to figure out who's a fraudster or not, right? So my question is, what do you think some of the downsides are and some of that scary side of it that, if you're a business owner in particular, you should probably be, paying attention to? And we'll start with Nikki and then we'll just go back through the original order. I'll probably finish this out.
I'll be quick. There needs to be guardrails. I think just at this immediate moment in time, if you're telling your employees, don't use ChatGPT, it's not private, don't use this, don't do that, they're going to be using it on their personal computers anyway because it's so helpful. I always refer to just creating like a 1-page, doesn't have to be a huge policy, but have some kind of a policy around the use that you might put data into ChatGPT to do whatever the heck you want, or into other platforms that might be quite public in nature. But just making sure that it's not proprietary or, or proprietary data or giving away, people's contact details, etc. So just being very cognizant of it. People are going to use the technology, it's there, but just actually have simple policies in place around the use to help people along.
Harvey?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I just still trying to wrestle with this idea of information, and one of the questions that came up was, this idea of, do brokers and middlemen go away? I don't think they go away. I think that there's definitely a pressure when you have information available for everybody and it wants to be out there, that people are going to be more informed. And you see what's going on in the residential side of the market now, where over the years there's been a reduction in fees, transaction costs. I think also in the construction industry, we face similar challenges to what Sanjay was talking about regarding insurance. Insurance has become very expensive. And as Nikki pointed out, there's a great variability. So if you're a GC and you're paying X percentage, and the next day you wake up and it doubles, it's actually the closer you are to the field. If you're a specialty contractor, if you're self-performing or you're providing your own labor, those are huge costs. So to the extent that we can get more information, I think that's better for everybody, overall reduction in cost and faster and better and safer projects because there's more information out there.
I think in the short term, there's going to be a little bit of an increase in operating costs for smaller companies because you're going to have to incorporate, some sort of checks and balances in your system, which may not be in the DNA, in the fabric of small businesses. Small businesses tend to be more touch and feel. It's a gut feel or it's some experience that somebody's running it. Now you have technology, but you need to have some system in place to sort of gather that information and then utilize it to see where it, where it goes. For the real estate industry, there is, constant overview, in legalities in terms of how you control information, where you store the information. So that's going to be a challenge for small real estate owners also. But I think, just like when the computer came out and when I started working in real estate, I knew landlords that kept their records on a book that basically told them what tenant paid what, and at the end of the month they would zero it out and then turn the page over. But now things have changed a lot more, but there is a sort of a curve that you have to go through. So in the short term, the challenge will be financial, but it'll hopefully even out and people adopt to this more.
Yeah, smaller companies, I think, are going to be at a disadvantage only because of resources, and they may not have as broad an outlook of the market. I think larger contractors, and referring just to construction now, larger contractors have the resources to invest and have a different view of the market. Smaller contractors and mid-sized contractors that are so deep in the weeds and trying to service their customers. I think what this creates is an opportunity for companies to provide AI as a service for construction companies. And I think there's a huge opportunity. There are construction companies that have already done that on the technology side with BIM tools and 3D modeling, but I can really see larger companies with resources coming out with AI as a service, which would be great, I think, for contractors that don't want to invest or may not be inclined. Maybe they just want to focus on what they're good at, which is building.
Rob's a good point. So we're pretty much on time, but I'll just make a final point before I turn it back over to Marcia. One of the things that this is uncovering and all this attempts, because computers only as good as a data set that it's trained on, or it knows, or it's whatever its body of truth is, that the reality is we all don't agree on things. And I know forget about the big political items that are controversial. Was that roof installed in 2007 or was it replaced in 2017? Did someone put the paperwork in, right? And the problem is we might know it, and somebody who knows what a roof, oh yeah, that's clearly not replaced in 17, can eyeball it. And I heard an example on a podcast, I don't remember which one, for attribution, but if you let AIs run unconstrained, they would come back with there's about a 30% probability that the Earth is flat, right? If they just read the internet, and so they put in little guardrails. If you ask ChatGPT, hey, is the Earth flat? It won't say, well, maybe it is, right? So I think that is one of the biggest limitations that I see, is that the truth is determined. So I think it's been a great discussion. I cannot thank you enough, everybody. So Nikki, Serge, Ravi, Sanjay, thank you so much. And Marsha, I will turn it back over to you for any parting thoughts.
And Joshua, I thank you, and I'm so glad that you took this opportunity to thank these incredible speakers. My texts have been lighting up by people saying this has been such an informative discussion, whether we're in real estate or not. And so thank you so much for building on our body of knowledge about artificial intelligence, especially in real estate, the opportunities, the challenges, what we're thinking about. And want to thank you again, want to thank our sponsors, Wells Fargo, The Catalyst, Westchester County's Office of Economic Development, RM Friedland, LaChase, Dorff, Nelson and Zouderer, LLP, and the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors. And of course, to our great partner, Dr. Anthony Davidson, and who is Dean of Fordham School of Professional and Continuing Studies, the entire Fordham team, and especially their Real Estate Institute. It's been an absolute eye-opener and a pleasure to work with you all. Thank you to our listeners, and more to be continued. Join us April 23rd for the next in this series. Thank you all. Have a great day.